Hi, and welcome to another episode of Silo Solving. I am your host, Danelle Marqui Brown. You can call me Day for short. And we have two awesome guests for today's episode. It's going to be a playful experience. And so let's get started with the introductions. As per usual, I'm going to have to read my notes because our guests just have such incredible stories and bring so much to the work that they do. It's just exceptional. So I'm going to introduce you. We have today Sara Auster and we have Amale Ghalbouni. And so, Ghalbouni, my apologies. And so I'm going to read each of their bios, and then we're going to begin this session. So first, I'll start off with Sara. Sara is a world-renowned sound therapist, meditation teacher, and author of Sound Bath, Meditate, Heal, and Connect Through Listening, which is the continuation of the title. Her work explores how sound and listening transform space, both physically and psychologically, for the purpose of creating connection and healing. She has facilitated intimate events in public schools, hospitals, boardrooms, nonprofits, the likes of the MoMA, Madison Square Garden. She shares her journey and expertise as a facilitator and advisor, collaborating with different brands who are heart-centered, such as in organizations such as the World Health Organization, Google, American Express, Apple, and Microsoft. So welcome to the podcast, Sara. Thank you for being here. And our next guest is Amale Ghalbouni, and she is a London-based transformational coach who utilizes Lego Serious Play, which is an experiential process design for adults to foster reflection and develop problem-solving skills. She works with founders and leaders to build change that actually works for them by helping people get unstuck and design a life that they can genuinely get excited about. She spent the last 15 years helping clients navigate and enjoy change. Most of that time has been in strategy and innovation roles from the managerial up until the executive level. And she's built and mobilized grown teams with all the day-to-day challenges that come along with that, and has led, sold, and scaled multi-million pounds or dollar pieces of work for genuinely exciting and global clients. So welcome to the podcast, Amale. Thank you both for joining. And so for context for everyone it ranges with each episode of Silo Solving. Some of the guests don't know each other at all. Some may have heard of each other, or it may be partial. But today's pairing, neither Amale or Sara have met each other. I recently met Amale actually via LinkedIn. This is the first time that we started commenting on each other's posts, and that's how we connected. And I met Sara, what year is it now? So I get 7 years ago, while attending a sound bath. So since the two of you have not met each other before, I'm going to facilitate what I'm coining to be called a silo breaker. It's a play on an icebreaker to kind of just get the conversations flowing between you two. So to start that, I'm going to be reading from Sara's book, Sound Bath. And give me one moment. All right. So I'm going to read two sections. And if you both, pardon me, ironically, I'm about to read something about the voice, and my voice got a little scratchy. But I'm going to read two passages. And afterwards, I'm going to ask you both slightly different questions. And if you can just chime in with what comes up for you. So in Sound Bath, in chapter 9, it's called Your Voice. And it reads, your voice is a powerful tool. It's how you share and communicate your thoughts, ideas, and emotions with the world. Your voice vibrates throughout your body, affecting your mental, emotional, and psychological states. And then there's another entry that says, we all used to sing as children. It was playful and joyful and free. We enjoyed freedom of expression without judgment of ourselves, our judgment from others, until one day you tell yourself, I am not a singer, and you decide you could only sing in the shower because who wants to hear your terrible voice? Over time, many of us develop insecurities around our voice. And so we'll go into this a little bit later, but the theme for this episode is inspired by you both. And so the theme is the art of play and listening. So, uh, Sara, since these are your words first, I'm going to ask if you can chime in, haha, pun intended, on what does the I love a good pun. It is what it is. But if you can chime in on the significance of the voice and from a sound perspective, and then Amal, after as you're like listening to Sara, if you can then chime in with your perception of the voice from the perspective of the individual as a professional and person. So, Sara, if you can start with our silo breaker session.
First of all, thank you for sharing that excerpt. It always feels fresh to me to hear something just out of context, pulling something from chapter 9. The book was written 4 years ago now. So thanks for refreshing my memory of that. So the voice is an instrument that each one of us has that we can all develop a relationship with. And I think it's truly important when it comes to creativity and expression to cultivate and develop a relationship to your voice on many levels, not just the sound that comes out of your body, but also how you present your thoughts and ideals, that voice as well. And the two are inextricably linked, meaning if you develop a vocal practice and you use your voice through play and improvisation, the other element of your voice and how you express will become a lot more true, and you'll be able to communicate with more clarity as well, your ideas.
And Amal, what comes up for you after hearing those words?
Interesting, because even hearing you read it out loud, like the first thing that came to me is actually finding one's voice and actually being able to use it. So not necessarily the literal voice, but actually like having the confidence in finding like your metaphorical voice, if that makes sense. And I find a lot of time, um, my thing is Lego serious play, and I find collaboration, innovation, workshops where people are given the space to have a voice and actually are actively encouraged to have a voice is just a fantastic opportunity for some of the quieter people who have a literal voice but might not have a metaphorical voice to actually practice that and actually express their opinion. And seeing people open up is just such a powerful thing.
And can you explain, Amal, like what exactly is the Lego serious play, and how do you use it with your clients?
Sure. Like the word says, like the name indicates, it's based on Lego. It's a methodology that was developed back in the 90s to help big organizations communicate, collaborate, break down silos, very, very topical, and actually bring people together. So it's a take on Lego, but it's very geared towards adults. And the goal is to have more effective communication and kind of more powerful collaboration. So you can bring a CEO into a room, you can bring a store assistant into a room, give them exactly the same tools, and ask them for their opinion on where the organization needs to go next. And that level of creativity, that freedom, that encouragement to actually have an opinion and like speak up. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just a bunch of bricks. You don't like it, you just break it and build it again. That playfulness really encourages people to explore and go deep and try things without risk of failure. How I use it with clients, really broad range. Currently, I'm doing a lot of work in the coaching space. I'm helping a lot of people explore their identity, their purpose, their passion with Lego, the stuff that comes up. Beautiful. It's incredibly powerful sessions. Like to see somebody actually figure out their identity in the space of like 15 minutes. Danelle, you know that. It's super powerful because you just like look at a bunch of bricks, which could mean anything to anyone, and you assign them your own meaning, and you tell a story through building something and giving it meaning and giving it a part of yourself in a lot of ways. And it's an incredibly powerful thing to do in the past. And sometimes I also use that in actually corporate settings to bring teams together, get people to know each other, get people to open up, share their strengths, their weaknesses, what makes them tick, figure out where they're going next. Yeah, I've used it to build the future of the culture of a company or the future 5 years of an innovations roadmap. So it's super versatile in terms of application. But what I'm currently enjoying a lot is the identity and the self-exploration aspect of it.
Maybe it was like 2 weeks ago, I actually did a session with Amale with like the Legos, and it was like very. I was quite impressed afterwards because in the moment I was in a playful state because honestly, I don't remember the last time I played with Legos. Actually, I did have to like I had to work with Legos, but not play with Legos. So there's a distinction there with being in that nature space of play as an adult because it is kind of rare to have that opportunity. Because it's different to like, for instance, if I'm not a parent, but if someone's a parent, it's just like playing. It's like you're playing with your children, but it's like playing for yourself is something different. So that was a very fascinating inward journey. And I want to, so Sarah, because so now I've experienced the work that you've done, Amal, and I've gone to numerous sound baths by Sarah. And I'm looking forward to the next one in person that I can attend. So Sarah, can you speak to so we were talking about play and using Legos to build this environment and dynamic, but can you speak to what you build through sonic architecture and silence? It's like, how do silence and sound and listening come together in the spaces that you create?
Sonic architecture. I'm taking notes. Danelle, as you know, I refer a lot to the work that I do with sound as creating space or a container with sound. And as I'm listening to you, Amal, speak about the work that you do with Legos, it's really resonating with me so much because the way that I work with sound in an individual setting and a corporate setting as well is using sound as a tool to access creativity, new perspective. And the way that I see it is bringing a bunch of people together from different roles in a company or different backgrounds and giving them permission to leave all of those titles and identities outside. And when we're inside the sound bath having a shared experience, there is an opportunity to start from the beginning. It's a blank canvas. So let's say if we were using a sound bath for problem solving, we would keep the problem just outside of the room and allow the space that the sound is holding to just be a container for whatever needs to come up. And what I find in particular to a corporate setting is that prior to the experience, there's a certain type of tone or conversation that's very surfaced. It could be kind of what they call like water cooler conversation. What'd you do this weekend? When's that report due? Something like this. At the end of a sound bath experience, if I have people share out, it's a deeper conversation, more about emotional aspects of thinking, how people are feeling. And suddenly the conversation that's happening in the room is a lot more nuanced and interesting. And that allows fertile grounds for new ways of thinking and seeing.
This is another question for you both, but from different kind of perspectives. So, Amal, you having come from like agency, strategy, innovation, like workspace dynamics, um, and over the course of the 15 years, can you? So I'm going to ask you if you can speak to what you've seen in like the evolution of professionals um, within the space of professionalism, emotional intelligence, and awareness. And the same for you, Sarah, over the years as you've been introducing to the world, like your work through sound facilitation, and to see how over the last couple of years, how our awareness of emotions as a collective, how that dynamic is playing out for you in your work and observation.
My experience is even there's an layer there's an additional layer of complexity in my experience because I actually started out in corporates. I did not start in creative agencies or in any creative backgrounds. I started out in banking and I was in in large corporates doing traditional strategy work of I will spend 6 months telling you what your next 5 years should look like, and you will receive a PowerPoint presentation which will be factually perfect, and you will put it in a drawer and we will move on with our lives. That was my life for a long, long time. Uh, I see Sarah nodding. Sorry, deep
No,
wound.
I was there too. I'm nodding too. I'm continue.
So in those kind of spaces, I don't think emotional intelligence was that prevalent at all because the importance was always put on more practical things, more tangible things, more analytical traits, and being kind of, smart, hardworking, you know, professional in the old school sense. So you show up, you leave yourself at the door, you enter as your professional self, you leave at the end of the day, you do whatever you want. But those two identities shall never mix in a lot of spaces. And I really, really struggled with that kind of environment. And I think it took years to shake that off. It was just institutionalized in me. Like the first agency job I had, it was really hard to tune into the emotional side of things. Like this is a job. I know how to do a job. I leave my humor at the door. I show up and I do a great job and I go home. And it took years to actually break that down and just accept that, you know what, like I am the same person at work and outside of work. And actually one of the most this might be a tangent, but hear me out. One of the most kind of transformational experiences that I've had, I went to a theater-led workshop that was all about impact and building personal relationships. And it was a 2 day course. It was run at the National Theatre in London by a bunch of actors. And all the exercises were acting based, which I used to do when I was a kid. But like your example, Sarah, I stopped singing because who needs to hear that? I stopped acting because who needs to see that? But those 2 days were so pivotal because you get to explore other people's perception of the way you're presenting yourself, the way you're handling kind of personal situations versus work relationships. And that was just such an eye-opening moment for me. That I was genuinely two different people. It was me at home, fairly confident, very assertive, outspoken, funny, according to some people. And then there was me at work, none of those things, super serious, very, focused on getting the job done and getting out of there. And tuning into that emotional intelligence, I think for me was a struggle, but also for people around me in different environments was always kind of a thing in motion. So to your point, I feel like the last maybe 5 or 6 years, it's become a lot more prevalent and it's become a lot more okay to be your full self at work. Not to use, cliches, but to actually, say you're having a really bad day and to expect people to go, I'm really sorry, I'll cover for you. That definitely was not my experience starting out, and I'm really, really glad for that shift.
Hearing you speak, I wrote it down and note because I'm like, I didn't think about a silo in that way, but it's like the emotional silos that we have within ourselves. So that's, I'm gonna think about that later. Sarah, what comes up for you?
I was just so taken by Amal talking. I almost forgot what I was going to say before. So no, it's fine. Just inspired by what Amal was saying. I was nodding and smiling because I have a creative background. I've always been an artist and a musician. I've never had a corporate job. And so for me to have the opportunity and the permission to enter into corporate spaces, it feels like such an honor. Wow. Especially these global companies that have huge impact, or these organizations like the World Health Organization that has global impact. And then to say, we're going to lie down and take our shoes off and have them agree to do that and be able to provide this container, this safe space to have this new experience where people can be vulnerable. And I think that relates to what you were speaking about, of bringing your whole self to work and being vulnerable and not being afraid to say what you feel for fear of being fired, uh, but allowing that safe space for creativity to come up, for freedom of expression, and creating that kind of structure for people. And so, coming from a background as an artist and a musician, I've always been interested in tapping people's emotions and creating a space for them to touch wonder and awe and beauty. So to be able to bring that into the structure of corporate settings and various organizations like that, it's like I said, it's a true honor. And I was just laughing because I could probably use some of your strategy perspective for my own business. That piece that you're saying is in your past. I mean, it says set you up for a beautiful foundation to live in both worlds.
We can build the future of your business for the next 5 years in Lego. Let's talk.
I would love to do that.
That's awesome. See, so just like that's an example of just like so one of my intentions for creating this podcast is and naming it silo solving is it's a play on problem solving, and silos exist in various ways. They can exist within a department, within an organization, institution, within like individuals, and like thinking that there's a lot of dynamics to it. And so it's like how to solve that so that way we can enhance our collaboration and cooperation skills as a collective, as companies, as partners, etc. So a a way to do that is I believe is to like stepping into each other's shoes and tapping into our empathy and curiosity, to not just like think within like a square thinking. And so my next question to you is kind of like a play on that. And so as mentioned, the theme of this episode is inspired by the work that both of you do. So the art of like playing, listening, like Amal, you play, Sarah, you as of listening. So I'm gonna like kind of flip the switch to like begin this next like rift of conversation and exploration. And so, Sarah, like, can you speak to what play means to you? And then Amal, can you speak to what listening means to you? And then if you guys can riff off of each other as things come to mind.
Yeah, I do actually think there's a lot of play in the work that I do for myself as a facilitator, because I'm playing instruments and I'm improvising that sound. I, as a facilitator, am experiencing play through the whole experience, because through the whole facilitation of a sound bath, because I am looking at the room, I am listening, and I'm in conversation with what's happening in how I play. So that's a playful aspect that exists in how I facilitate. I think the play is present for the participant because I'm asking them to put down a judgment of experience. And I think when you invite play into an experience, it's like a given. You can be silly, you can have a unique experience that you've never had before, and there's no judgment around it. I think it's particularly crucial when you're working with the voice too, and I work with a lot of people in the voice, and as you said, freeing the voice or finding the voice or just connecting to your voice. You have to start from a place of play. If you're taking yourself too seriously, it's very easy to contract and restrict your self-expression. So when I think of play and how it relates to what I do, that's where I go with it.
And Amal, what does listening bring up to you, for you?
Um, I think it's such an underrated skill is the first thing that I would say. Because a lot of people hear, but not a lot of people listen. And like when you have conversations with people who are just there, go through the motions or just there to interrupt you and tell you what they think, it can be really jarring, can be really, yeah, it can be really hard. So like listening for me is just like skill number one. I was actually having this other LinkedIn conversation with somebody the other day about like the top skills that you gain as a consultant or a facilitator. And for me, the top skill you can gain is listening. It's like putting your ego at the door, putting your preconceptions at the door, putting your own kind of preferences or notions at the door, and genuinely being present and interested and curious in what somebody has to say, and receive that like openly and in the way it's intended. So yeah, that's the thing that comes up for me when you say listening. It's that genuine openness, curiosity, judgment-free attitude to receive what somebody has to say to you and genuinely like absorb it, process it, and respond to it.
What I find fascinating and why I wanted to have this conversation with you, both and for audiences to hear, is how one can use the art and skill, as you said, Amal, of listening and the art of play as a tool to problem solve some really challenging and complex social um, challenges that exist. And what was coming up for me as I was listening to you, like some of the words that you were using, and like this, like the you're both using of this, like keeping the problems outside, like certain problems outside the door, and focusing together for like teamwork, if you will. So if we could, if I would like to like kind of pivot the conversation into how can either or the art of play and listening help break down silos and hold space for people to be better uh, teams and communities in tough situations so that you can build that skill of listening and giving someone space to figure it out or ask for help, etc.
I don't know, because you were talking about acronyms and things. I have one as a tool for listening and accessing what I call full body listening. And the acronym is PAUSE. And so these are particular elements that I feel in my experience are required in order to really be truly listening. And so It's presence, awareness, having an having an awareness of what somebody's saying, uh, universality, which is kind of like an experience of empathy, understanding where the person is coming. I am like you, you are like me. Uh, Stillness, which means sometimes you can tell if somebody's eyes are darting all around, or they're shifting. They're not really paying attention. Something else is going on. So stillness is required, and then you can access this expanded place, an evolution of sorts. And so that's how I think of the stages and steps of listening, not only for problem. I mean, of course, in a sound bath, these are how we engage with the sound in a sound bath. It's really truly only a microcosm of how you can also use that practice in your life as well.
It's like I'm like I need a moment to pause. Amale?
I think it's quite, the first thing that actually popped into my mind is a workshop I ran with somebody I know who's also a Lego Serious Play facilitator for an emergency services force that shall remain nameless. And we did that last year, and we had, I think, 12 men who'd been in this high intensity, high pressure job for anything between 17 and 28 years. They've never spoken to each other. They kind of know of each other, but they don't have time to say hello. But something you said, Sarah, earlier stayed with me. Is like they were given the permission to come to this workshop and then explore what a better culture and what collaboration could do for them. And just being given that permission was incredibly powerful because they could speak freely to the challenges they were having, to the complexity of collaborating with other forces who don't necessarily want to collaborate, who are also aware of their budgets, etc. So it was such a freeing moment where we spent 3 hours exploring what was working for them, what wasn't working for them, and how might we resolve some of those challenges. And to your question on like how do you enable people to kind of think more systemically about change, and how do you kind of enable them to make those changes? Some of the things that they came up with were really, really small. Things like, I should probably have a coffee with a newbie once a week. That would be good. Like some of the changes we imagine are needed are huge in our minds. Like they take millions of pounds and like 6 months to put in place. But actually, the first step to changing anything is probably a coffee with somebody, or a chat, or somebody like reaching out and saying hello. So yeah, the thing that just came to me was like sometimes the challenge, we overcomplicate the challenges, and sometimes the solutions are like the simplest thing possibly imagine.
And do you have any other just like thoughts that come to mind or questions that come to mind for each other that you want to ask of each other or myself?
I'm curious to know because I've had a few sound baths. I'm in London, so not with you, damn it. Hey, one day. But the first sound bath I had was in as part of a community that I'm part of, and it was just such an amazing experience because they had like an external person come in for like a little spotlight session, and I'd never experienced anything like that, and it was just incredible. But the first proper sound bath that I chose and I booked, I was in tears the whole session. Definitely not in a corporate session, but you know what I mean. It was a personal, personal thing that I did. But it's incredibly powerful, and it just like helps you reconnect with yourself, and it helps you kind of detach of everything that's around you. All like the day-to-day mundane things are top of your to-do list and like top priorities. All of a sudden you're there by yourself just thinking about nothing quite often, and just giving yourself that space to recenter yourself, rebalance yourself, and just clear your mind. And I'm curious to know how that ends up helping collaboration from your experience.
So it's interesting because when I think about the term collaboration in my work, I can think about it of how I facilitate collaboration within a group, but also I collaborate a lot with organizations and brands. You know, for instance, like the most recent with the World Health Organization, we launched together the first ever course for public health leadership for better public health leaders. And they felt strongly that mindfulness and sound therapy should be included in this course. And so rather than me coming in to facilitate something internal for the World Health Organization, we got to work together so that I could help them to solve a problem that they were having. How do we integrate this experience of mindfulness into what we're doing? And I have the opportunity to do a lot of that. And because mental health is a big concern of a lot of people right now, and mindfulness and sound therapy are a way into that. And I see a lot of connections of how it can be integrated. And so I get to work with the companies to create new messaging, new products, even new series, working with the New York Philharmonic because they want to integrate a wellness series into their programming. So I'm facilitating a sound bath experience with some members of the New York Philharmonic. And that's the way that I mostly collaborate with brands, is they see the problem, which is a big problem nowadays, of dealing with mental and emotional health, because it's not just mental, I think. So offering some solutions for their employees, for their communities, and that to me is the most interesting thing. Okay, well, how do you see it as a problem, and how can I help you to facilitate a solution in a way that is unique to your mission and your offering? I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, super cool.
That's great. Like, Sarah, what you just shared, like, for people who, like, for the audience, it's just wanted to point out how that what you just shared, and that from the business standpoint, technical term, that case study between the work that you did with the World Health Organization was exemplified, like, a reaching out, like stepping outside of a silo to create like a bridge to collaborate, to integrate. And it is there's many elements that go into doing that, but that is like a key way to not only break down silos but lead to innovation, and, as you said, new services, new solutions to arrange. So that's really encouraging and exciting to hear that companies and brands and organizations are making such initiative. So on the flip side of that, from the macro level, let's go into the micro level. Can you speak to, like, what are ways that from an individual, by strengthening their ability in the relationship to play and listening, can help them operate more in the world to be a problem solver or a silo solver?
I think one thing that both of us touched on, Amal said it several times, and I did too, in regards to both play and listening. What's required is non-judgment and openness. I see that as the the connecting theme so far, as I'm listening to her, as the for both of us and the work that we do, is really bringing people's awareness to this idea of being open, not limiting your thoughts, and also removing judgment from your experience and your expression.
And just to add another word, because I like three words, curiosity, which is similar to openness, but that kind of like this innate ability to just go, well, this might be wrong. Let's try it out and see how it goes. Or I have no idea how to solve that. How might I go about doing this? And coming up with wacky and wonderful ideas without fear of judgment or failure.
I'm not sure if you could how it is in London, but like here in the US there's been more talks of like shortening the work week as a result of like the pandemic and how this work from home dynamic hybrid has like shifted like the workforce outlook. And it's as we're going through this like we're going through some structural cultural change, pardon me. Have you like has there been more of a dialing back of like work culture in London? And Sarah, if you've observed some types of shifts happening where there is like perhaps a trend, if you will, to provide more space so that way people can play more because it actually would make them more creative or more efficient because it helps to like relieve stress as well. So like if you can just speak to what you observe from the culture of work and more permission to play.
I mean, the UK work culture is very different from the US work culture. I think to start with, we have a bit more balance when it comes to, work life and, hours people work and vacation days or holiday days.
Mhm.
Um, so I think our starting point is a bit different to start with. But funny enough, I think last year there was a national experiment where a bunch of companies volunteered to go down to 4 days a week for, I can't remember if it was 3 or 6 months, but it was an actual scientific study, like organized nationwide, where they selected a bunch of companies across industries and they dropped everybody's hours to be 4 days a week, but they didn't ask anybody to sacrifice their salary just to see whether that would be a good experiment. And I think all the results that I've seen that were published off the back of that were positive, that people were more productive, happier, the culture was more positive, and like the team felt closer together. So hey, fingers crossed that that gets rolled out to the whole of the country. That would be the dream. But anecdotally, I know a lot of people who have gone down to 4 days a week, sacrificed their salary, like 20% of their salary, or decided to do condensed hours where they work 5 days but in 4 days and free up one day to do something else. I started a 4 day a week job last summer. I'm never going back to 5 days a week because I really like my Fridays now. I get to like pursue my own projects and I get to meet interesting people and I have a bit more headspace to do things that I want to be doing. But yeah, I know a lot of people who have done the same thing as well. And I don't know anyone who's regretted making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I work for myself, so I can have as many days off as I want, which is a luxury. But of course, it's always important to me to be practicing what I preach, and often I am the reason for rest when I'm going to work. It's it's so that other people can take a pause and take a rest and have this space for exploration, creativity, play. And the fact that I am busier is a good sign that more companies are prioritizing, as I said, mental and emotional well being and adding that into their offerings.
With in the digital sphere that we live in screen culture, like so Amal, for instance, like even though you are in London, um Sarah does like do like virtual sound baths, in which kind of I wanted to bringing that up just to knowing that you both work with clients in person and digitally, what do you are there ways that you think that technology can maybe enhance that screen culture dynamic, and or is there more so like what is the case for, if possible and if safe, for the in-person dynamics and how sound resonates differently, and how play exchange when you're in the presence of someone um, plays out?
Yeah, I like you said, I do work like both in person and remotely. One-on-one work is really easy to do remote because you can be just as present with somebody through a screen as you are in real life. Teamwork is much harder. So when it gets to uh, messy day-long Lego Serious Play sessions where people are trying to like figure out the next 5 years or like problem solve what's wrong with the culture, it's really hard to do that through a screen because it's also such a tactile form of collaboration that you can do your own bit, but the magic is when all the individual little models come together and people figure out how to mesh things together, and you just can't do that through the screen. You probably could. I know you can. The facilitator can do all the work. It's just not the same as having people in the room going, but this piece, where does this be? What are we doing with, I don't know, mental health? Where does mental health slot into this model? It's such a completely different vibe. So I feel like technology serves its purpose, but has its limitations when it comes to kind of more complex um, problem solving, where you need that kind of, I feel you need that kind of that bond, that relationship between people, and it's much easier to build that when you're in the same space than when you are remote. And don't get me started on hybrid. I don't like hybrid meetings. They're
Oh.
really hard to get right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe virtual can apply a little bit more easily to the work that I do, because, well, prior to the pandemic, first of all, I refused to do anything virtually. That was me being closed and short-sighted. And once I was faced with that lockdown problem to solve with my work, the choice was pretty immediate to say, okay, my purpose and my mission and my work is still the same. I want people to have a safe space to move through emotional things, and everybody's emotions are super heightened right now because of what we're all going through globally. And the first thing that I did, Danelle, I don't know if you remember this, like on March 14th of 2020, right the day after we were locked down in the US, was I went on Instagram Live for the first time to do a sound bath because I saw the need there for people to slow down, to connect, to take a breath together. It was still by far one of the most powerful sound baths I facilitated, with thousands of people together all over the world, having a shared experience of what we were going through, being able to connect like that. And it's invited a new exploration for me to play and to see, what are the pros and cons of being able to connect virtually? What are the pros and cons of being in the same space together? How do I suggest what might be better for a particular situation or opportunity or partnership that I'm having, because that I'm working on? And there's a different answer for each uh, request that I'm presented with. And sometimes it's even a recording. It's not even being facilitating live. I can facilitate a recording. They can listen to it whenever they need to, and it's still highly effective. So I think both.
I remember that session because that was just such a, we were living in a parallel universe at that time. So a once again, thank you for you and Alex for leading that sound bath, and that in this series, and listening to you, like this, what was coming up is this like kind of like plasticity, like being flexible to or adaptable to the situations, and that's a skill to work on, because some people, like, when I mean, as you're saying, there's different levels of like requests, but there's also different levels of challenges to respond, and some really challenge us to expand our horizons of how to problem solve a curveball. And I just in terms of not so much play, and perhaps play is like a way to like approach solving the curveball, but my brain is going back to what you said about the moment of pause, and like establishing that, um or I guess I'm just going back to like what you're saying about the moment of pause, and it's clicking. I'm listening, but I'm having echoes of thought come back up, and they're getting loud. So that's all. That I guess there's no question there. It's just an observation. Um,
Well, actually, something came up for me when you were talking about there are a lot of sports analogies in business, right? I learned
yeah.
this from working with different corporations, and this one that I love that I think is interesting that maybe we want to even move away from is pivoting, right? So I think about when I think about pivoting, I think of like basketball, right? You have one foot in one place and you're just circling around yourself. And I'm thinking, well, that's not very innovative. Maybe instead of playing basketball, you need to play baseball instead. And if you just think about pivoting and circling around yourself, you might then just be stuck in a limited thinking. So I like what you said about this flexibility, malleability, and resilience to think, so far outside the box that, I mean, we're not talking about boxes anymore.
Yeah, it's this universe. It's this. It's like, what's the word for that? It's like infinite possibility of like different. Um, so actually, like the first episode of this silo solving series, I had a physicist and a musician, and just hearing you like, I'm thinking from my interpretation of a physicist like perspective of the expanding universe of that potential. And I think that actually, yeah, like the musician was saying that too. It's just like this ever expansion of various ways. So to go with the flow, but but going back to the point they just made about the pivot, I've used that word so many times, and now I'm gonna like correct myself, because I had that. um I get the analogy in the basketball, but I also think of like in ballet. But at the same time, and this is actually how Amal, you and I connected. Like, or I remember us like having a conversation on LinkedIn. I did have a thought, and I've been having this thought for the last like 5 years, Sarah. Um, that goes back to jazz. I started to like, because I would get so caught up in like judgment of myself, perceived judgment of others. It's like there's like this phrase of like, it's like you're jack of all trades, but you're not a master of none. And it's just like, why do you hop around in your career so much? And I would get kind of like, oh, about it. But then I started to sink in, and it's just like, and then I think I was using the term pivot a lot, but the nature of a jazz song, I was saying like that life is like a jazz song. It's like going with the flow and turning, but to your point, not keeping like one foot in the mud of anchoring and just moving in like a circumference, but like jazz hands and all, like all over the court. Is uh, definitely the way sometimes life, and often the times the way that life can be. I'm going to give one more kind of like open call if you had any questions for each other before I do kind of like the closing bit.
Well, I look forward to continuing a conversation with you, Amal. I'm so
Same.
curious about your work.
Same here. Yeah, I'm like so happy like we got to meet this way. Yeah, I'll definitely get in touch and follow up with this.
Sure. Well, thank you both for participating in this like creative problem solving experiment. I hope that the audience were able to have some great takeaways from this. Uh, reach out, follow in the show notes. I'll give you their social channels so you can keep up with their work. And again, to you, Sarah and Amal, thank you for joining the Silo Solving podcast. Take care.